Hello bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with my December reading wrap-up. So before we get too far into 2020, and before I can tell you about my stats and my best and my worst books of the year, I need to tell you about the things that I read in December. I'm thinking / hoping this is going to be a short video because I only read 4 books in the month of December. It was a bit of a slow reading month for me. Out of these 4 books, I had 1 3-star read, 2 4-star reads, and 1 5-star read. So I'm pretty happy with those ratings. And I had a 5-star read. I found a new favorite book in the month of December, and I'm so glad that I always wait until the year is over to do my best of the year lists and things, because you never know what you're gonna find in the month of December. Out of these 4 books, 2 of them were part of a series. One of them was a mid-series book, and one of them was the start of a series. And genre-wise, we've got a mix of high fantasy, horror, and paranormal mystery, I think is what I'm going to call it. The 4 books that I read this month were The Last Dragon Princess by Cynthia Payne, Nosferatu by Joe Hill, Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which is the first book in a new series, and The Broken Eye by Brent, which is the 3rd book in a series. I will have timestamps in the description box for each of these books so you can jump around to the ones that you're most interested in hearing about. Alright, let's start with the first book that I finished in the month of December, and that was The Last Dragon Princess by Cynthia Payne. I was provided a free paperback copy of this book as well as a free ebook copy of this book in exchange for an honest review. I ended up settling on a 3-star rating for this book. Like a lot of my 3-star ratings, there were things about it that I liked and things about it that I didn't like so much. I definitely thought the world building was really interesting, unique, different from things that I've read before. I really liked that there was an element of science that gets brought into the book that makes this a little bit of a genre bender, but it's definitely primarily high fantasy. One of the things that I struggled with was the main character. I just found her to be kind of naive, and I didn't like or understand a lot of the choices that she made, especially when it came to romance. So this book has a fairly strong romance subplot, and I didn't realize going into it that romance was going to be such a big part of the story. But unfortunately, the romance in the story didn't work for me, and because it was a larger part of the story, that definitely impacted my overall feelings towards the book. The story is about a young woman who, in her world, she is a breeder, and she's the last of her kind. She is able to give birth to sons that can transform into dragons. So there are dragons in this book, but they're shape-shifting dragons, so they're also human, which I thought was really cool. I really like the idea of people that can transform into dragons. At the opening of the book, she is faced with the decision of who to marry, and this marriage will have some political ramifications, so there's definitely some political maneuvering that goes on in this book. In the end, though, the things that I enjoyed about this book weren't enough for me to give it more than 3 stars. The next book that I read in the month of December was Nosferatu by Joe Hill, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I primarily listened to this on audiobook, which I got out from my library, but I also had a physical copy, which I also got from my library. This is an adult horror book, and I read it in December because part of the story has to do a little bit with Christmas. One of the villains in this book, Charlie Manx, he drives like this really old car and can take children in this old car to Christmas land, where it's Christmas every day. Except this Christmas land is a lot more sinister than the name would lead you to believe. I wasn't really sure what to expect going into this book. I had never read Joe Hill before, but this book is one of my friend Rachel's favorites. I will link her channel in the description box. It's Rachel's favorite, and so I was hoping that I would also love it. We actually did this as a buddy read. It was a reread for her, a first-time read for me, and that was a lot of fun. I got to tell her all of my favorite parts of the book, and she got to tell me her favorite parts of the book. I definitely recommend the audiobook version of this book because the narrator, Kate Mulgrew, is amazing. This was the first time I'd ever listened to her narrate something, but she is so good. The voice that she uses for the villains in the story just gave me chills. The way she says things in this book for certain characters is going to stick with me for a very long time. There's one character in the book that says dude a lot, and now I can't say dude without hearing the way that Kate Mulgrew says dude in this book in my head. In the story, you are primarily following Vic McQueen. She starts out at the beginning as a young child, and she finds out that she has a unique ability to find things that are lost. And then you're also sort of following Charlie Manx, who is a villain. And like I said, he likes to take children in his car to Christmas Land. And by take children, I mean kidnap children and take them to Christmas Land. This book was action-packed. I could hardly stop reading it once I started. I was constantly wanting to know what was going to happen next, and it was just a wild ride from the beginning to the end. Another thing that I loved about this book that I wasn't expecting to get out of a horror book are the characters. These characters are so fully fleshed out and interesting, real people. People who are flawed but are trying to do the best they can with the things that they have. I love the characters in this book so much, and I was definitely not expecting to connect with them in that way, just because that's not something that I often encounter when reading horror books. Something that I appreciated about Joe Hill was that his characters actually got hurt in situations that they should get hurt in. I mean, how many times have you read in a book that someone got in a car wreck but then was able to walk away and it like doesn't really affect the story? But no, in his books, or at least in this one, when someone is in a car crash, when someone gets hit by something, there is bodily harm done to them, and I don't know, I kind of really appreciated how realistic that was, but also reminded me how fragile human bodies are. I love this book so much, definitely a new favorite. I got kind of emotional at the end of the story. I don't think I ever cried at all while I was reading, but I got pretty damn close a couple times. New favorite book, new favorite horror book. I definitely recommend reading Nosferatu, especially around Christmas. Alright, moving on to the third book that I read in the month of December, and that was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I had a physical copy of Ninth House out from my library. This is the first book in the Alex Stern series. I think that's what it's being called. And I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. This book has been quite controversial or polarizing in the book world, so I wasn't really sure what to expect going into it. I mean, I had an idea of what to expect. I knew that it was not like the Grisha series. I knew that it was dark. I knew that it was adult. I knew those things. I just wasn't sure what I was going to think of it as someone who loves Grisha and who's loved everything that Leigh Bardugo has written so far. So I was very nervous going into this book, but I'm really glad that I ended up enjoying it. I didn't love it the way that some people have, but I still really enjoyed it. So this is an adult, I would call it like a supernatural mystery, because magic does exist and there's ghosts and such, but reading experience wise, it felt more like the focus was on the mystery. I mean, you couldn't have the mystery without the occult stuff that was going on, but it definitely felt like a mystery book. The story is about Alex Stern, and she is a student at Yale. She's been given a full ride because she can see ghosts, or greys as they're called in this world. She's been given a job in this secret society called Leith, and Leith's job is to basically police and oversee the other secret societies at Yale. There are 8 other main societies, and they all specialize in a different kind of magic, and Leith exists to make sure that the other societies are doing their magic in a safe way. So Alex is given a full ride to Yale, where she's pretending to be a student. Well, not really pretending, she is a student, but then she also has this side job that nobody can know about of being part of Leith. At the beginning of the story, there is a murder on campus of one of the people from the town, so not one of the students, and Alex spends most of this book trying to figure out why that girl was murdered and if the murder was related to the secret societies. There's also this other mystery about Alex's mentor who disappeared partway through the semester, and the people of Leith are trying to figure out where he went and how to get him back. So those are the 2 mysteries that pull you through to the end of the story. It's definitely on the slower side and is more character-driven than plot-driven. You learn a lot about Alex and her past. She has not had an easy life, and this book does have a lot of content warnings and trigger warnings. Definitely check out some reviews on Goodreads that will go more in depth into the kinds of triggering things that might be in this book, but it's definitely got some really dark subject matter. I really liked the character of Alex. She very much will do whatever it takes to survive, and she's just lived her whole life basically in survival mode, and I find it really interesting to read about characters like that. There really wasn't very much romance in this book, just like a tiny hint of romance, which I loved. Despite this being more of a slow burn book, I still was really engrossed while I was reading it because I was invested and wanted to know about these murders and the disappearance of the mentor. And so I was constantly engaged while reading it, but I could see why some people would find it boring. I really like the way that things ended. Enough things wrapped up that I feel good about this being, a whole book. But also, there are some lingering questions that I can tell are going to propel the story forward into the next book in the series. And I will definitely be reading the next book whenever it comes out. Alright, and the last book that I read in the month of December was The Broken Eye by Brent, which is the third book in the Lightbringer series. I primarily listened to this on audiobook, which I got from my library, but I also had a physical hardcover copy, which I also got from my library. Man, these books are really long, and this one, it took me forever to read. I started reading it in November and just slowly picked away at it, although I definitely read the second half much quicker than the first half. I definitely had some mixed feelings about this book, but in the end, my feelings were more positive than negative, so I settled on a 4-star rating. But I would say like the first half of the book was a solid 3 stars, and I was really struggling, thinking that the rest of the book would also be a 3-star, but the second half of the book was more of a 4-star rating. So those are always a little bit hard to rate because it's somewhere in between 3 and 4, and I had to decide what it was closer to. But in the end, like I said, my feelings are more positive than not, and that's why I gave it a 4-star rating. Some of the things that I liked about this book were some of the things that were revealed. As usual, Brent Weeks has some shocking reveals. I continue to really enjoy the character of Tia. I think she is my favorite character. Kip is growing on me. He's definitely a lot less annoying than he used to be. And I still don't like any of the other characters, so that hasn't changed. I do think a lot of the characters are meant to be unlikable, but I just personally prefer having stories where I can root for more than just 1 or 2 of the characters in such a large cast. There were still a lot of like eye-rolling moments and other things about it that I didn't enjoy. The pacing was quite slow for the first half. It's really not until like 60 to 70% of the book where I felt like the plot was really picking up, but I'm finding that to be a common occurrence in his books. I think he just has a lot of setup that needs to be done before things can really get moving, and I definitely struggle when I'm reading through the first half of his books. I do plan to read the next book in the series, probably not in January, but possibly in February. This series has been a bit of a struggle because I'm enjoying it but not loving it, and I've gone back and forth about whether or not to quit the series just because I'm not loving them. But at this point, I'm more than halfway through the series. I want to know what's going to happen with the rest of these characters, so I'm just going to need to read the next 2 books to find out. Alright guys, those are all 4 books that I read in the month of December. I hope you guys had a good end of your reading year. I hope you found a new favorite in December like I did. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye.